In this video, we are going to create a teleport system that can be used to teleport players in your game to a different place. I'll be creating a timer, and when it reaches 0, all players in the game will teleport to another place. This is very useful for games that have round-based systems or require X amount of people to start. Feel free to tweak this, you don't need to create a timer, that is just the example I'm going to go for here. For those of you that want to make a timer, let's start by creating the timer text. So I'm going to go to View, Enable the Explorer, the Properties and the Output. It's normally very important to have the output window enabled because this is where we'll see errors if we're running our code and something doesn't work. So let's create the text label. Under Starter GUI, I'm going to add in a Screen GUI. And on the Screen GUI, I'm going to click this little add when I hover over. And I'm going to add in a text label. I'll rename this to Timer Text. For a better explanation of creating GUI in Roblox, check out my GUI 101 series, which will be linked in the description. For now, I'm just going to customize this how I'd like, set the size to use scale, not offset, so I'm going to go 0.20, 0.20, and then I can manually resize it how I'd like. And I'm going to just quickly design this, and I'll get back to you once I'm done. Perfect, there we go. So I've just set the outline to be black. I've made the text, I've set it to 15. That's going to be my default time. So I'm going to make the timer start at 15 seconds. You don't have to set it here. You can just have it say text. I just thought it'd look nice because we are going to change it in script anyway. Now, inside server script service, we need to add a script. We'll use this to create a timer on the server that counts down. Replicated storage equals game::get service replicated storage. So this just gets our replicated storage service and stores it in a variable named replicated storage. Now let's create our timer, and I'm going to set it to 15. This will be the length of the timer in seconds. Timer is just what I'm going to call the variable. So we have a variable called timer set to 15 seconds. Now in order for us to change the text, we need to change the text on every player's client. Because the timer text is in Starter GUI, that means it's going to be on the client. It's going to be a client GUI. So we need to update the text on every player's client, because this is a server text, this is a server timer, and we want to update that timer on every single player's machine. So we need to use our remote event to fire the request from the server to the client to change this text. So under replicated storage, I'm going to add a remote event, and I'm just going to rename this to a change timer text. Now back into our script, we're going to make a function that will loop through every player in the game and change the timer text for each player. Change timer text equals function, and then in this function we can loop through every player, so we can just do for_player in pairs, game.players, :get player, :get players, sorry. Here we go. And this will loop through every player in the game. We're using underscore because normally you see something like for I, v. I is just the sort of index, so what this is getting a table of players, so I would be the index of the table. We're not going to need that. Player is the actual object in the table, so player is the object that is represented at index underscore of this table. Don't worry if that sounds confusing. All you need to know is the player that we are looking through, so we're going through each player, and player is the current player that we're looking at. And for each player, we need to change the timer text. How do we do that? Well, we're going to fire that remote event that we've just created. So we can say replicated storage dot change timer text :fire client. And every time we fire the client, we have to pass in the player. I'm using PLR for short, by the way. And we have to pass in player because we need to know what player we want to fire the client on. And we're also going to pass in the timer because we want to change the timer text to whatever the timer value is. We could use a module script for the timer, but I don't see a point in that as we only need one script for it. We're not going to be reusing the timer everywhere, literally just in the GUI. So I don't see a point in making a module script, so we'll go for this method. Now we're going to call the change timer text because we want to initially set up the timer text to be the timer starting value. If we don't do this, say this just said, rather than 15, this said text, then calling this function here, it means for the first second, it's just going to say text. And we don't want that, we want to set it to be the value straight away. Now we need to loop through code every single second to decrease the timer. So to loop through code every second, we can say while wait1 do. And what this will do is run code every single second. But if the timer is greater than 0, obviously we don't want to decrease the timer if it's less than or equal to 0 because it's already at the end of its life. So timer minus equals 1. This decreases the timer. change timer text, and we'll just call the change timer text function here, which will just update the text every second. That's it for now. I'm going to close this script up. Now inside our text label that we created earlier, add a local script. We'll use this to update the text. Local replicated storage equals game : get service replicated storage, exact same as last time. And this time we're going to get our text as well. Local text equals script.parent. What I mean by text, I'm actually going to call this text label just to avoid confusion. The text label is the parent of this script. So you can see this script in the Explorer. The parent is the timer text. Now, when the change timer text function is fired and we hear that request, we need to update the text. So replicate storage dot change timer text dot on client event : connect function. So the player is automatically passed in, but we don't need the player in as a parameter here because it's automatically being passed in, but we don't need to do anything with it. It's hard to explain, but think of it like the server is just telling basically the server is telling itself what client we want to run this code on. So the player isn't necessarily used as a parameter in here, but it is passed through to understand what machine we're running the client, or what client we're running the code on. All you need to know, if it sounds a bit confusing, don't put player in here. We can't do that. It will not work properly because then player will technically be timer. So all we want to pass in here is just timer. After these brackets, we'll just say text label dot text equals toString timer. And this will just set the text of the text label to the timer value, but obviously we turn it into a string because we want to display it. A string is basically it's a bunch of characters put together. It's almost like an array of characters that make a word. Now let's close that. We need to create a new place, so go to View, Asset Manager, and Places. I'm already in it here, but Places. And we can add a new place. So let's right click, add new place. Now that we've got a new place, we can right click and rename it if we would like. I'm going to call this test place. We can right click and copy the ID to the clipboard. You can now go and double click this place and design it however you want. It's basically another game in a game. Pretty interesting. But if you double click this, you'll be able to load up and design this game however you want, this place, sorry. But now we'll make sure we've copied that ID. So copy ID to clipboard. We need to enable some security settings. So go to Home, Game Settings, Security, and we want to allow third-party teleports. Make sure that is enabled. Mine already is. And we can close that up. Back to our server script. At the very top, we need to add the teleport service now. So teleport service equals game, get service, teleport service. So again, getting the teleport service, storing it to a variable. Now on this if time is greater than 0, then I'm going to add a little else here. And this will, so if the time is equal to 0 or it's less than 0, then obviously we want to teleport the players because that means the time has got to the end, so it's a time to teleport the players. So what we'll do is loop through every player again. I'm going to copy this this code up here. There's nothing wrong with copying your code and pasting it and reusing it. The only difference is what's inside. So we're still looping for every player, but I don't want to fire that client. This time, I want to use the teleport service teleport function and passing in the place ID that we've just copy and pasted. So obviously, because we've copied this code and pasted it down here, we've now lost it from our clipboard. So just go back to your places, right click, copy the ID to the clipboard again, and paste it in here. It's going to be quite a long ID. Don't worry about that. And now we can put comma and the player. And the reason we pass player in here is because the server wants to know what player to teleport. So we're going to teleport one player at a time, but we are looping through every player in the server, which means that every player is going to get teleported. Now, of course, if you want a system where it's not a countdown timer, but maybe you need 10 players to stand in a box, maybe you've got like servers of 10. What you would do is, rather than looping through every player, you'd just loop through every player stood in the box. So you'd create a table. I'm not going to show it because there's so many different things you can do. If anyone wants a video on something specific, let me know. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the timer. But say you wanted 10 players to stand in one box, and then all 10 of those players get teleported. You could create a table, an empty table, and whenever a player stands on the box, they get added to that table. Or if they leave the box, they get removed from the table. And then what you could do, when there's 10 players, you would loop through the player in pairs. The only difference, rather than game.players to get players, you would use the table. You'd loop through the table. And then you'll just teleport every player in the table, for example. Anyway, now let's close that and test. So we're going to test the timer first. I'm going to close the asset manager. So the timer is counting down, that is correct. And we'll let it get down to 0 and see what happens. So we see it gets to 0 and we get errors. Cannot teleport. Teleport failed because cannot teleport in the Roblox studio. So unfortunately, we need to test this in Roblox itself, as you can't test the teleport service inside Roblox Studio. Click File and Publish to Roblox, and find your game in the Creator Hub. Once you've had your game in the Creator Hub, I'm testing it here, as you can see, you'll see, just click the 3 dots in the top right, and click View on Roblox, and you'll be able to open it up from Roblox. You see here, the game's not published, so the teleport failed because I've not published the place. Unfortunately, to actually teleport players, you do need to publish the game. So let me go to back to Roblox Studio, open up our place, just double click it and it'll open up another Roblox Studio window. And now you can see we're in this place. We can verify it says test place just here. Hit File, Publish to Roblox, and wait for the, there you go, it'll say publish new changes in test place to Roblox. Once we've got that little purple message, that means it's done. We can then close the test place. We're not going to need it again. Now we can go back to Roblox and test it out again. There we go. So now this time when it gets to 0, it should work. And give it a second and we should get teleported. There we go. It does take a little second sometimes, but obviously that's not a huge concern. It's just because we've got to let the server contact the place, pretty much. Basically, we've got to let a server contact another server. It's sort of one way of thinking about it. But other than that, networking stuff aside, we've now teleported to the place. You see it works correctly. If for whatever reason it did not work, you waited, say, 5 seconds and you didn't get teleported. If you press F9 on your keyboard and click server, you can actually see all sorts of developer stats. So you can see your average ping, but that's nothing you're interested in. You'll just want to look for errors. So if it didn't work, you'll see, if you see any red messages, that means an error, which might tell you why, whatever reason, you didn't get teleported. So that's how you can sort, and you can also see client information here as well. I accidentally pressed F12 and not F9, but you can see all sorts in here. That's it for this video. You now have the understanding required to change this and utilize it however you would like. You could change the timer to a different system. The teleport part is all the same. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and check out our Discord server, which you can find a link to in the description. We are trying to build a community in there, so I would really appreciate it if you could check it out. Thank you and goodbye.